young, the rocky branch, it ran right in front of the school. If we had a lot of rain, it would flood. And normally you had to cross that creek. You couldn't get to the schoolhouse without crossing the creek. We had several ways that we could go, but I remember one time specifically that it was swollen and we got to the creek. We'd done some type of a shortcut to get there faster through the woods and hills. And Robert, Mr. Neely, who was our teacher then, he had to come out and help get us across that creek. I can't remember how we got across. We probably went across a log or something like that. But he had to help those of us that lived on that side of the creek get across to the schoolhouse.
All right, tell the story of at the original location. You had mentioned that the metal handrail out in front of the school was there, but there were only 2 steps rather than 4 or 5, whatever is there now.
Yeah. Well, originally, instead of having a porch that in front that came across including both doors, each entry had concrete steps.
Okay.
And there were rails on either side of those steps. Well, my dear cousins dared me one very cold winter to stick my tongue to the metal rail. And of course, I had to do the dare. I couldn't let that pass. And so I plopped my tongue on that metal rail. And of course, I became quickly attached to it. And I don't remember exactly how we got me loose from there, because I think I was probably carrying on something pitiful. And because I was probably just about 9 years old. But I can remember that it was a painful situation when we got my tongue detached. But cousins were good for doing things like that.
Yep. Okay, what do you remember about everyday school life? Did they ring the bell before you got to school, or were you already at school? They ring the bell to start?
Well, we usually, I guess, got there on time, as far as I recall. But before we played outside, if the weather permitted, before school started, if we got there in time. So when it was time for all the students to come in, the school, the teacher would ring the bell, and that indicated that it was time to go to class. Plus, after recess and lunch, none of us had watches back then. I hope the teacher did. He was probably the only one. Well, the teacher would ring the bell, which meant it was time to cut out the play and come back in and study again.
So I heard somebody mention earlier today that they would have the younger kids sit up front, they would have the older kids sit to the back, and there were actually all 8 grades, 1st through 8th, all in this one-room schoolhouse. That's correct?
That is correct. I think, well, the younger children sat up front usually. The desks were smaller up front, plus it was closer to the heat in the winter when it was cold. But that is correct. We sort of graduated back. But you sort of got to pick your desk. You were not assigned your desk. You could pick it. And but it was yours for the school term. I think I had the same desk, even though I started there when I was in the 2nd grade. I think I was in the back. I don't know how I rated that, but I think I had the same desk the whole time I went to school.
You didn't carve your initials in it,
But
though.
my brother Bob carved his initial in one of his desks, but I didn't do anything like that. I don't. When we went up to the teacher to discuss the subject or whatever lesson it was, well, just we went up a class at a time, which may have been anywhere from 1 to 4 people.
Okay. And I guess as the teacher was teaching whatever class, the other older kids would help the other ones with their work or do their homework?
Sometimes of course, we had our assignments for each subject in school, and you had to do those. You did your quote homework while you were at school. You didn't take homework home. So when you completed your assignment, if you had all your work done, you could. Sometimes the teacher would have you watch someone else. Well, like someone in the first grade that's learning their numbers and letters and starting to write. You would help them with their numbers and letters and writing, or when they started spelling, you would listen to them spell words or listen to them read, practice reading for when they went up front with the teacher to read. Also, another thing we did when our assignments were complete is we would raise our hand and ask permission to visit, Jane at her desk or something like that, and you could go over there and you had to whisper very softly because you couldn't talk out loud, but maybe you would take your paper and colors and you would color pictures or write notes to each other there rather than write them separately and pass them out afterward.
Okay, Christmas time. Tell about getting the tree.
Wow, Christmas time was a big, exciting time because several things were going on. And you started 2 or 3 weeks in advance planning a program that we presented to the families and the local community families. And but one of the first things, well, actually it wasn't the first thing because due to the fact that the tree would die too soon, but a week or two before the actual program, we would go out and get our own tree. So all the students and the teacher would go out to the surrounding fields or woods and pick out their biggest perfect tree that we could find, drag it back to the school, and I'm sure the teacher fixed it so that it would stand up. I don't remember any of those details. And then all the students would, over the period of a day or two, make decorations and help decorate the tree. We didn't have a lot of bought decorations. All I remember, and maybe we didn't even have those when I was in the first, second and third grade, but I do remember that we had tinsel and we had icicles that were store-bought. However, we would string popcorn and we would string those little red berries, and we would make paper chains out of colored paper, and we would draw colorful balls and things, and we decorated the trees with a lot of homemade decorations. We had no electricity, so we didn't have any lights or anything. And I think maybe the families, different community families, we might have had a few real Christmas balls on there, but we thought our tree looked great. And we had fixed some kind of a star we put on the top. It was probably made out of yellow crepe paper or tin foil or something, but we did have a star. We would fix a star for the top. But it was a lot of fun having that. And then we had to start practicing. Of course, we would pick out a play. Usually it had some type of a Christmas story theme to it. And everyone had a part in the whole program. And those that could memorize the most lines,
That's all right.
they were the ones that had the most speaking parts. And we presented this Christmas program, which consisted of this play, and then people said poems or we sang songs and things like that. And then the highlight of the whole Christmas program of that evening would have been Santa Claus. Santa Claus always came, and he always had passed out all the gifts, and we students would draw names and exchange, gifts that way. But it wasn't $10 or $15 gifts like it is now. It was more like a piece of gum and a pencil or crayons or a coloring book or something like that. But anyway, you got a present.
What did Santa Claus bring?
And Santa Claus, he was always had oranges, sometimes apples, but always oranges and hard Christmas candy for everyone. Everyone got a bag with fruit and candy in it.
Any idea who it was that would dress up like Santa Claus? You were a little young.
I was a little bit young. I think that my Uncle Arthur may have been Santa Claus one year, but I really don't recall who was Santa Claus. I know it was some of the fathers of the students in the community. But that was a very exciting time. And I can remember when I was about 9 or 10, my dear cousins again that I went to school with informed.
All right, was there any kind of a graduation service or event at the end of the school year, especially for the 8th graders, but for any of the grades?
It seems to me, and I may be making this up, I don't know why, but it seems as if I recall that sometimes on the last day of school, we would have a recognition of who was finishing up the 8th grade. And it seems as if sometimes, I don't know if we did it all the time, but it seems as if I can remember that we had a school picnic or something like that. But that may be just something I wished we had done rather than actually happen.
Okay, besides schoolwork, I heard somebody mention, or maybe it was in your paper that you wrote, that there was a mid-morning recess, and after mid-afternoon recess, as well as lunch break. Tell us about those.
That's correct. They were the highlight of our day, of course, because we could all go out and play together. We had 15 minutes of a recess of a morning and afternoon, plus we had 30 minutes for lunch. And so at recess, we would all dash out, and we played a variety of games, from something we made up to things that you've heard of, such as any over, hide and seek, crack the whip, red rover, Flying Dutchman. And then we'd make our own homemade stilts out of trees, little trees, and we'd, do things on stilts. We would draw hopscotches and play hopscotch. We played marbles. We played jump the rope. We had a old regular rope that we used for our jump the rope games, and we played kick the can, just anything we could imagine.